Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second episode of the Alchemix podcast. This is a Chartreuse showdown. And my sister and producer Lydia just looked at me like, is it though? Is it a Chartreuse showdown? I just made that up, but we'll go with it. I like it. And the reason why is because we have 2 weeks worth of content back to back. Green and yellow chartreuse. So last week on the Instagram and YouTube channel, we made 7 green chartreuse cocktails, and this week we made 7 yellow chartreuse cocktails. And the reason why I bring that up is because typically the model of the podcast is going to be we make all the cocktails on the YouTube and the gram. So if you're not subscribed and followed Alchemix there, go over, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow us on Instagram because that's where we post the tutorials for the cocktails with all the history and the lore and things like that. But typically the model is we're going to bring the cocktails from there after we make them and do the instructional videos and bring them over to the podcast so we can do a little bit more of a deep dive. And this is going to be a particularly interesting week. There just was not enough content for green and yellow chartreuse individually to do a full podcast on them, so I figured I would just do them together. So what we're going to do is go over a little bit about what it is, the story, and then all the cocktails that we made, the 7 green from last week and the 7 yellow from this week. But I actually want to start out back up a little bit because I shit the bed a little bit on the vodka cocktails video, and I wanted to bring this up because the first podcast was right after the vodka week. So the series of cocktails that went up on the YouTube last week was 5 vodka cocktails, and starting this week, which is the second week of January 2021, if you're watching in the future, and I'm bending time here. But the week after that, we did 7 Collins cocktails, and then that's when we did the first podcast. So we shifted the entire model. Now we're doing 1 recipe per day, and we're doing the podcast, so that's new. So the point is, the week before Collins cocktails, I had a little bit of a hiccup. So if you watched on the YouTube, we did vodka cocktails, and when I was going over the Vesper, I shit the bed and said that it first appeared in 1963. What I meant was 1953 in Ian Fleming's Casino Royale book. There's just a lot of info floating around the ether in my mental Rolodex, if you will. So I just wanted to preface that because we really are doing our best to deliver the most accurate, history possible and citing our sources. That's largely possible because of David Wondrich, which I talked about last week. But I want to give a shout out to one of my best friends. Her name's Jen Beard. She's one of the best bartenders I've ever met in my life. And she's the one that called me out because she knows basically she's a Vesper aficionado. And she's the one that pointed out that I shit the bed on that and got the fact wrong. So I apologize for that. And Jen, thank you for that. And she actually teaches a class. I can't say the platform, but we're going to post a link in the show notes and in the description. It's like $19 a device, I believe it is. She teaches a class on vodka and gin cocktails. I think she has one on bourbon and then one on cocktails named after celebrities. She was on the award-winning team of Katana Kitten when they won. I'm drawing the blank on the exact award, but at Tales of the Cocktail 2019, the first year that I attended. So go check that out. She's a badass. And Jen, I appreciate you calling me on my shit. So jumping right in, this is Chartreuse Week. And I got my notes here and also have the Chartreuse book, which is where we got, some of the info for the last 2 weeks of content that we did here on the Chartreuse Showdown. I do want to preface this entire episode and say that I may say a few things that some people may not like if you're a big chartreuse head. But I bring that up initially because I don't want you to think I'm shitting on them. I actually think that we did chartreuse a big favor with the last 2 weeks. I'm not saying that we're like the best in the world, but the point, in terms of the light that we painted chartreuse in, I think we did a pretty amazing job because I got my cocktail here and I'm actually sipping the last one that we made. A nice rosemary nose. And if you're watching on video, I've got behind me some of the cocktails that we made for the second week, yellow chartreuse. But as always, they're not all there because I drink many of them. But what I'm sipping on right now is the first ever Alchemix original cocktail that we've ever made on the channel. We spent literally the first 2 years just paying our dues and, making historical cocktails and giving people the credit they deserve with modern classics as well. And that's still going to be a very big part of the show because that is one of my frustrations with this entire thing about people making cocktails online is they just tend to steal recipes, make things up, not give credit to their predecessors. The whole thing pisses me off. So we're still going to be doing that, but we jumped into doing our own as well. So we're going to sprinkle some of our own cocktails here and there. And I didn't personally invent this. This is a cocktail called pardon me. Take another sip here. This is a cocktail called Wild Stallions. And like I said, I didn't personally invent it, but it was invented by one of my best friends, John Philby, who was a gentleman that taught me much when I first started. He's been in the game a long time, and he's now the COO of Alchemix Consulting, and invented this cocktail for a client that I can't name in 2019. But it's amazing, and you can see the recipe on the channel. It's the very last yellow chartreuse cocktail that I made. It's called Wild Stallions, and it's a delicious blend of Blanton's bourbon, yellow chartreuse, a homemade honey ginger syrup, and fresh rosemary. If you want the exact specs, again, you can go over to the YouTube and Instagram, check it out there. So, chartreuse. Now, as I say, we have the book here. Now, this book is a little confusing to me. It's written by a gentleman named Michael Turbach, and I don't know his affiliation with chartreuse. I would have to assume that he had to get some of the rights, get the rights to actually write this book if he's not, or if he's actually with chartreuse, or if this was something that was sponsored by them. This is where we're going to just jump into the deep end. First of all, the book is all right. There's a couple of typos, and there was 2 separate pages where the same recipe was posted, but under a separate name for whatever reason. And many of the recipes in here, it looks like there's, there's nearly 100. Many of them are not grounded in history at all. And they just sometimes do something that I really hate, which is I got another book. It's called How to Drink Like a Writer or something like that. And I bought it sort of flippantly because I like the historical aspects of cocktails, and writers like Hemingway who are deeply involved in what we know as the cocktail culture of writers at that time, or whatever time period rather. But they shit the bed because they just brought up a bunch of recipes that were not grounded in history, which makes no sense for a book called Drink Like a Writer. And they just said things like, okay, this is a cocktail that somebody would have drank, or they might have drank this because they liked it. And then they just made it up. So there's a lot of that chartreuse in the chartreuse book as well. That being said, I don't hate it. The measurements are a bit weird. They're not really laid out nicely, so it's just I don't know. It doesn't seem like this is the only book on chartreuse that I know of. So I think that part of their entire appeal is that they try to be, well, I know this for a fact, they try to appeal to ancient history. so that people think that they're like some far removed ancient recipe, and we'll jump into that in a second. But we got a lot of the cocktails. I think out of the 14 cocktails that we made over the last 2 weeks on the YouTube channel, in the Instagram, I'd say I think 10 of them were from the book. So again, that's 7 green and 7 yellow. So the history covered in the Chartreuse book, it's called The Holy Grail of Mixology with Cocktail Recipes and Lore. They don't really go too much into the ancient history, and when I say ancient, I'm talking 1764 and 1605. He actually just goes back to like late 1800s and early 1900s and talks about how it was part of early cocktail culture, which it was in America, and which is why we're covering it today. But Chartreuse itself claims that they are still. All right, let me back up here. This is where it gets a little murky, and this is where we're going to just dive into the deep end, and it's going to be a little bit tricky. So let me preface this by saying, I like Chartreuse. I use it. We use it. The reason why we covered 2 entire weeks of it was because it is both green and yellow are ingredients that are absolutely necessary to make many classics and modern classics. But I called up the CEO of Alchemix Consulting, John Philby, and I asked him about this because I was having a little trouble when I was digging into the cocktail history. And one thing I pointed out was in the book, they open up with the last word, of course, which makes perfect sense. But one thing that he said and that I agree with is that they're really just riding the last word until the end of time, really. It doesn't seem like there's really a lot of innovation going on. You have cocktails that we've made before, like the Naked and Famous, which is more of a modern classic, but it's an obvious twist on the last word. It was invented at Death and Company in the early 2000s, and we actually skipped the last word and the Naked and Famous throughout the last 2 weeks, even though those are arguably the 2 most famous Chartreuse cocktails, period. And the reason why is because we wanted to dig deep into Chartreuse and actually dig out some cocktails that are absolutely necessary, that Chartreuse is necessary for their flavor profile. And I'm not saying that the Last Word or Naked and Famous are not the case. It's just that those are very simple 4 equal parts cocktails where Chartreuse is a crucial ingredient, but I don't know. It didn't do it for me. We've covered them before. We wanted to do something a little more unique, dig deep, and dig into cocktails that were, highlighted Chartreuse in the best of ways rather than just writing, ancient history, which I suppose could have been a mistake because Chartreuse themselves are doing it. So many of you already know how to make the last word in the Naked and Famous, and you can find those recipes very easily. And we covered them back in the day. But my story with Chartreuse is a little unique. So when I first started working at a cocktail program that was a little advanced, I was working with a French gentleman, and it was the first time I ever tried Chartreuse. He actually gave me a shot of green Chartreuse and said that this was like it was like a sort of a bartender's handshake in a way, kind of the way a Fernet is, but I guess to the French. And I was very confused, and it's not that I don't like it or anything, but when I tried it, it's certainly a complex flavor that you got to dig into. I really don't even know how to describe it. Green Chartreuse has maybe a tiny hint of lime pith, lime skin, certainly jalapeno on the nose, but it's very, very sweet on the front palate. So sweet, in fact, it's almost like the sweetness is almost unbearable to me. So that being said, most of the cocktails that you make with Chartreuse are very low there's a very low measurement of chartreuse that goes into the cocktail because the flavor is so potent. So I think you'd have to be a madman to drink it on the rocks. One thing I will say, I'm not trying to get into the little, like, metaphysical here, but every time I drink chartreuse at all, within quantities of like an ounce or more, I have very strange dreams and I don't sleep well. And so do what you will with that. This is where we kind of get into the murky waters of chartreuse, and I'm going to cover this in the beginning because I don't want people to think I'm going to shit on the whole episode. That's not my intention at all. I just want to keep it real and point out the things that I can point out because I have to. So they claim, I had originally heard from this French barman that they still had the exact same recipe. They were still using the recipes from 1764. The story goes, and this is all on their website, that there was a order of Carthusian monks called Chartreuse 500 years before 1605. This small group of monks that lived in the French Alps, and what's it called? A marshal of King Henry IV's artillery brought them this ancient recipe, right? And this is in 1605, of herbs and spices that was said to cure illnesses and prolong longevity or something of that nature. But it wasn't until 1764 that they made the actual chartreuse recipes, which is a different recipe from the elixir for long life, is the actual translation of the original elixir that the Carthusian monks were making. Okay, so first of all, I want to say I don't want to totally blame them, because it is the case that if you look on their website, they don't actually explicitly claim that they're still using the same recipe from 1764. Because when I first heard that, I was like, okay, this is a little bit weird, because the top of the bottle always gets crusty, kind of like when you have something with way too much sugar or high fructose corn syrup or chemicals. And I'm not saying that any of those, I'm not saying that they're lying. I'm just saying that it's convenient that they can't prove that they're still using the same recipe from 1764. One thing they do claim explicitly on their website is that it is the only liqueur, I believe this is exact wording, the only liqueur in the world which is naturally green. But if you look at it, it's just like a bright neon green. It seems like anybody that's been on the treadmill in the last decade that drinks chartreuse, it doesn't sit well with them if their body is fairly healthy. And I'm not trying to get all like health nut on you or anything like that. It's just that there is a large movement of mixologists that are taking better care of their bodies now in these days. So it never sat well with me. Something doesn't seem right. It's like an explosion of sugar. I can't imagine that a recipe from 1764 is bright neon green. That's just my opinion. Do what you will with that. Now, let's just get into their own story. Okay, so as I say, small group of Carthusian monks. The recipe is sworn into secrecy between a small lineage of these monks. And the original elixir for long life was 69% alcohol, 138 proof. And then, as I say, it wasn't until 1764 where they made a milder version, the green, which is 55%. In the same year, made a sweeter and milder yellow, which is 40% alcohol. They do still sell the elixir végétal, which again I believe that's the French translation for elixir for long life. But so I should back up too, because I did forget to mention. So their website doesn't. They do claim that it's naturally colored. They don't claim the whole recipe is natural, and they don't claim necessarily that it's the same recipe from 1764 on the website that I found. But they do say. I was once told that by a Chartreuse rep when I was working as a head bartender at Papillon in New York City. And that's just what it is. I'm not saying this is just a small preface for the entire episode. I don't want to say that this is all what it is going to be about. There's cocktails that are necessary. The Chartreuse is necessary to make. And it's good. It is good. I mean, it's very herbal. It's in your face. It's just hard to pin down what flavor it actually is. But it's again, it's hard to imagine making a last word with something else. It's not even possible. So, I guess what we'll do is, one thing too is their VEP products are both very, very good, which I guess didn't get made until the late 1800s. But I actually first tried both their VEP products when I was at Tales of the Cocktail in 2019 for the first time, and I ran into a fantastic Chartreuse rep that gave me a try. In my opinion, they're much softer and much more natural tasting than their other products. You know, their main green and yellow Chartreuse that we covered the last 2 weeks. And they're much easier to sip. So, I could sip those, whereas I couldn't necessarily sip a green or yellow Chartreuse. Now let me just hop right into the cocktails too, because the cocktails have interesting history. And this is where we paint, hopefully turn this around. I don't want to paint Chartreuse completely in a bad light. But on that note, I forgot. And one thing I will say too is that while spending time on their website, they do of course, as I say, the appeal to tradition and appeal to ancient history, which in essence just means that they use this idea that it's an ancient recipe from 1605, given to them by the gods or whatever. I'm being hyperbolic, but, let's be honest. The Carthusian monks have never been known to be the most honest people, or, a branch of the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, all right, I'm done. I should stop. But the website, on that note, in terms of them trying to make this claim that it's an ancient recipe, the website looks like it's also from 1605. And the cocktail photos are not good. I mean, really, they should consider hiring Alchemix to do all their product photography, and because of the cocktails and their cocktail creation and curation, because the cocktails that we made, I think, throughout the last 2 weeks are far better than what they have on the website, which is just, Chartreuse and tonic and last word and very obscure and very just, it's just, the whole thing's weird. All right, that's enough of that. I'm jumping right into the cocktails. So last week, green Chartreuse, we kicked off the whole episode with a blackthorn sour. This was really interesting. Most of you saw it. It's very good. It's 3/4 ounce of lime juice, bar spoon of green Chartreuse, bar spoon of fresh squeezed pineapple juice, and 1 ounce of sloe gin in a cocktail glass with a lime wedge and a pineapple slice for garnish. This is a particularly interesting cocktail, and one of the more important ones we've ever made, because it was invented by a man named Tom Bullock, who was the first African-American to publish a cocktail manual in 1917 whilst working at the St. Louis Country Club, and he named the manual The Ideal Bartender and dedicated it to the next generation of black bartenders. And he was the son of a former slave and a Union Army soldier. And you guys know me, I'm a sucker for a good story. I think that's a beautiful story. The cocktail was very good. It was tart, which I like, and it was fruity, and not particularly spirit forward. It had sloe gin, which I briefly talked about in the episode, but I'll go into a little more detail here. So slow gin is not gin necessarily. Um, but it certainly has that flavor profile. So sloe gin in essence is sloe berries, which are in the plum family, and they get picked and similar to wine, get sat out until they get really shit. I forgot the official term. I'm sure all the wine nerds are gonna shit the bed, but when they get all plump and fruity and okay, so they get sat out until some of the the fiber and the water leaves, and then it's sweeter. Okay, so sloe berries in the plum family, and then they get steeped in an actual gin, and then sugar is added. So people have likened sloe gin to more of like a liqueur. It's sort of we used Plymouth sloe gin. It sort of has, in my opinion, a flavor profile that you could liken to like a dry port, except for probably with a little more citrus on it. So it's quite good. I like it because it's sour. The term blackthorn sour is a very apt name. It is a great cocktail. And then we moved along the second. The green chartreuse cocktails is the Champs-Élysées, which many of you know. It's a classic. It was named after the Champs-Élysées itself, which is, what is the exact translation? Most beautiful avenue in the world, yes. La plus belle avenue du monde, I believe, is the way you say it. If you're a Frenchman, feel free to call me out on that pronunciation. But like many cocktails, we don't know exactly who invented it. Many people think it was Harry Craddock. I believe there's a version that was published in Harry Craddock's Savoy cocktail book, but yeah, there was in 1930. But then the thing was a little fishy action, and many people have called out Harry Craddock for this, and Jerry Thomas, and they all did it. Just like, it's funny. I'm just going to go off on a little side tangent right now. But the interesting thing about Jerry Thomas, Harry Craddock, and many of these early cocktail guys that wrote books and founded this, the first cocktail revolution is, I'm not trying to take anything away from them in any way, shape, or form, because they did a lot for cocktails. But they're kind of no different than these kids on Instagram that are stealing recipes and claiming that they invented them, or people, it's kind of the same thing. That's what's funny. Is like people get mad about that, and it just doesn't really bother me, because as long as people like it certainly is frustrating, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it sucks, but as long as people like David Wondrich exist, it doesn't bother me, because we know that he's legit, and he's always given credit to the actual most accurate historical references possible, as we are trying to do here as well. But anyway, Jerry Thomas, 1930 Savoy cocktail book, but it was published as a punch, so it wasn't the individual version. The exact version that we made is actually from Death and Company, and here's another doozy. As much as I love Death and Company, their cocktail codex gives no credit to anybody, and even old fashions, Sazerac's, Champs-Élysées. I guess, to be fair, they're maybe kind of just going off the idea that most people have an idea of the history, I guess, or they don't really care or whatever. It does seem weird, but that's not really their cup of tea, so I get that. But it shows up in a cocktail book called Drinks Long and Short, 5 years before the Savoy cocktail book that was published in 1930. Pardon me, I had to take a sip of Blanton's bourbon. And on that note, I got sidetracked, but big news. Next week, we start our Whiskey Wednesday segment, which I'm very excited about. This is where we're going to do a deep dive on a different whiskey every Wednesday and give you the mash bill, tasting notes, and put it in a cocktail as well. I think you guys are really going to enjoy that. But Anyway, Champs-Élysées. All right, forgive the interruption. So it shows up in Harry Craddock's 1930 Savoy cocktail book as a punch recipe, but then it was discovered that it showed up in a cocktail book called Drinks Long and Short 5 years earlier in 1925 by a gentleman by Alec Henry Adair, who was known as Robin. He was a French gentleman, or I might be wrong about that. Might have been English. Either way, he lived in France and was business partners with Marcel Boulestin, who was largely responsible for popularizing French cuisine in America. So, Alec Henry Adair, who wrote Drinks Long and Short, where the Champs-Élysées recipe first shows up, actually was a food writer. And what's interesting about him is that he looked at cocktails as a barbaric American concept that he didn't actually like. He said that he mostly drank wine, and it was really funny, and I covered on the channel. He was absolutely right. The cocktail did start out as a barbaric American concept, and that's why it is what it is today. Now, obviously, it's not what it is now, but so he was a known hater of cocktails and drank wine, but he lived on the Champs-Élysées, the story goes, and it sounds like he was served originally a Champs-Élysées in the early 1900s in France. And then I would guess that probably post-Prohibition era made its way back to the States and somehow kept the same name. Now, as far as when it turned into an individual cocktail, I have no idea. But it sounds like it was a punch for a while. Now, the recipe that was adapted by Death and Company that we made on the channel was 1 dash of Angostura bitters, half ounce of simple syrup, matched with a half ounce of our green chartreuse, 3/4 ounce of lemon juice in a coupette, and 2 ounces of cognac. We used Pierre Ferrand in a coupette with a lemon twist. And that is probably one of the better recipes that I've ever tried, except I personally would dial down the simple syrup a little bit. As great as D&C is, it was a little too sweet for me, in my opinion. But it's very balanced. It's a good way to highlight brandy. The green chartreuse adds a little almost like I would say a tiny spice, just a tiny bit. Because, as I say, green chartreuse has just the tiniest nose of jalapeno. Not spicy in any way, that's not what I mean, but just the tiniest kick of spice. That being said, I also might up the Angostura bitters to maybe like 3 dashes. I personally probably would have done like 3 dashes of Ango, 1/4 ounce of simple syrup, half ounce of green chartreuse, 3/4 ounce of lemon juice, 2 full ounces of cognac with the lemon twist. It would have been a little bit more balanced, not as sweet in my opinion. But as always, don't feel obliged and do what you will with that. But Champs-Élysées, it's a classic. It's a must try. It's a must drink. It's a good drink. It's actually one of the better ways, in my opinion, to highlight green chartreuse. So if we put this back to back with like a last word, let's say. I'm not saying these cocktails are comparable in any way, really, other than the fact that they have green chartreuse in them. But that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying in terms of the measurement and proportions to the rest of the cocktail, I think that's a better way than like the last word. So last word being 4 equal parts and the Champs-Élysées being 2 full ounces of brandy and then just a half ounce of green chartreuse and lemon juice. That's my preferred way to drink chartreuse. It's just a little bit. It's like, what is it? I guess it's about 1/5 of the entire recipe. So that's what it is. The Champs-Élysées. All right. Next up, Green Elevator. Now this was the only green chartreuse cocktail that we made that did not have a base spirit. The main alcoholic component was green chartreuse itself, but as always, an interesting story. So, the green elevator was invented by Crosby Gage, the legendary writer and theatrical producer. And he published it in his own book in 1941 called Crosby Gage's Cocktail Guide and Ladies' Companion. What a PIMP. Which he wrote whilst he had a brief stint working at the New York Times before he ventured out on his own, started writing in his own ventures and writing screenplays and all that. The book was forwarded by Lucius Beebe. So Crosby Gage's 1941 Crosby Gage's Cocktail Guide and Ladies' Companion. The forward was by Lucius Beebe. Now, Lucius Beebe, we've covered before on the channel. He was the one that wrote the Stork Clubber. Yeah, the Stork Club Bar. I always get that mixed up. Very strange. The Stork Club Bar, which was kind of like a unique, weird food cocktail book, but it was more like a how to be cool kind of thing. And but Crosby Gage is an interesting guy, or not Crosby, forgive me. Lucius B was an interesting guy because he was like one of the original food photographers, and he photographed cocktails as well, and he was also a writer. And so in the Stork Clubber was one of the books that exploded the Moscow Mule into popularity and vodka on the American market. So he's a very, very interesting gentleman. And I guess he must have known Crosby Gage, and they were both imbibers. And Lucius Beebe is somebody you should definitely read up on in terms of, it's interesting, this is 1941. I mean, he was writing in like the mid 1900s, I guess. 1945 was also when the Moscow Mule came out, I believe, originally in writing for the first time. And so it seems like this guy, Lucius Beebe, is flying under the radar as like sort of a cocktail historian for his time. It's very interesting. And kind of does sort of version of what we do here at Alchemix, except for his time. I'm not trying to make a ridiculous comparison, but yeah, that was interesting. So the green elevator, I guess the story goes, Crosby Gage used this cocktail to seduce women every time. His words, not mine. Or he used it to seduce women, and it worked every time. And he was known to make it in his hotel rooms as he traveled because he loved chartreuse and brought it with him wherever he went, supposedly. Now, the recipe is 1 egg white. I kind of get why, actually, because this is a pretty gorgeous color, and I can see how you can impress anybody with it. 1 egg white, ½ ounce of grapefruit juice, ½ ounce of lime juice, and then a full ounce of green chartreuse. So it's kind of low ABV, no garnish, egg white. I personally didn't care for it. It looked good. It's a good thing to know how to make, so definitely go, just like all the recipes, go watch the video, learn how to make it, put it in the mental Rolodex, again, if you will, but not my cup of tea. It's not spirit forward enough, but it was interesting. And I figured we should do a cocktail that highlighted green chartreuse, but didn't have a base spirit. Blanton's. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. All right, now I'm going to drink this Alchemix original Blanton's cocktail. All right, okay. So, next up we have a nuclear daiquiri. This is an obvious twist on daiquiri. This was an interesting cocktail. This was a very interesting cocktail. All right, so it was, in essence, this is sort of just a daiquiri with overproof rum and green chartreuse, but it has an interesting story. So, nuclear daiquiri, full ounce of lime juice, 3/4 ounce of green chartreuse, ½ ounce of falernum, the rum-based liqueur. We made ours homemade. We didn't post the recipe. We just didn't have time, but in essence, it was basically, you make a simple syrup except for use rum instead of water, and then grate lime skin, pardon me, fresh ginger, and almonds typically. But there's many different ways to make it. I think that's how we made ours for this week. And so the nuclear daiquiri was invented by an Aussie gentleman named Gregor de Gruyter. And he invented it whilst working at the lab in London in 2005, and unfortunately passed away 4 years later from, as I say in the video, mysterious. Like many great artists, sort of passed away of mysterious causes. Nobody really knows, but he was known to have an amazing attitude, be an innovator. And so we dedicated that entire episode to him and the legacy that he left for Australian barmen. Because in 2005, I mean, cocktails had barely made a splash in Australia. I mean, they were barely turning themselves around in the U.S., let alone in Australia. So yeah, it was an interesting cocktail. It's a very strong cocktail. We also served that without a garnish in a Nick and Nora glass, just for the interest of clarity. If you like a good daiquiri, you'll probably like this. It's stronger with a little more depth and a little more viscosity because of the falernum. And the green chartreuse definitely adds some elements that are interesting. So we'll move right along to the final word. As I said earlier, we didn't cover the last word, or naked and famous, but we did cover the final word, which, like the naked and famous, was invented at Death and Company, and is a twist on a last word, obviously. And it was in the early days of D&C Phil Ward, and that's the final ward with an A, W-A-R-D. He named it after himself. Certainly doesn't seem like a gentleman with an ego. He simply switched out the vowel in the name and changed two ingredients. The lime juice became lemon juice, and the gin became rye whiskey. It's interesting. It's fine. Nothing much to see there. It's just classic D&C behavior. Next up, we have one that's way more interesting. It's called an Irma La Douce. And this is a gin cocktail with green chartreuse. Gin and green chartreuse go together like bread and butter. It was invented in Boston by a fine group of ladies. Which was news to me. There's an organization called Ladies United for the Preservation of Endangered Cocktails, and I checked out their website, and it is awesome. That was really fun. It's really cool, and I'm being dead serious. It's really awesome. Their website, it's a national group of, we'll just say, seasoned gals who like to imbibe, and their website says their group is dedicated to preserving the cocktails that their mothers and grandmothers drank. Like chartreuse swizzles and things like that. So they love chartreuse. And there's a Boston segment of the Ladies United for the Preservation of Endangered Cocktails, which had their annual chartreuse party in 2007 and invented this cocktail called an Irma La Douce and named it after Shirley MacLaine's bright green stockings in her role as a prostitute in the 1963 film with the same name, Irma La Douce, and was introduced to the market by Josie Packard, who we've covered. In fact, the very first cocktail that we made in this new studio that I'm filming in right now, and that we film all our videos in, was a cocktail invented by Josie Packard. She's a trailblazing bar woman from Boston. What's interesting about her is she was one of the first people to ever use mezcal, at least publicly. And that was the Johan Goes to Mexico. It was the very first cocktail we made in this bar. And she, I guess, took her foot off the gas in terms of bartending and reinvented herself since then. She was moving and shaking in the early days of the the second cocktail revolution. It's interesting how the second cocktail revolution was, I just have to say, largely exploded by many women. And you talk about Audrey Saunders, you talk about Josie Packard. There's tons of them. Those are just two off the top of my head. But yeah, so Josie Packard took the Irma La Douce cocktail, brought it to the market, and served it at Drink in Boston. And it is 1 slice of cucumber muddled, quarter ounce of simple syrup, and then you have 3 equal parts of a half ounce of fresh squeezed lime juice, fresh squeezed grapefruit juice, and green chartreuse. Then 1.5 ounces of Hendrick's gin, served in a martini glass with a cucumber wheel for garnish. So if you can imagine, this is a citrus-forward cocktail that highlights the cucumber in Hendrick's gin. Double down on the cucumber flavor profile there with some fresh cucumber. And it was quite good. This is one of the recipes I really liked. I like citrus forward. It's certainly not a boozier cocktail. I like boozier cocktails typically, but I like citrus too. So citrus forward, very gardeny, very vegetally. I'm sure that's not a word, but good, very good. Last green chartreuse cocktail is called The Hunt. This is a Molly Cohen cocktail, who was the beverage director at the Rainbow Room in New York City and invented this for the 2016 winter menu. It is a bar spoon of simple syrup matched with a bar spoon of green chartreuse, 2 full ounces of bourbon. We used Buffalo Trace. Stirred, strained into a rocks glass with lemon and cinnamon, twist of lemon and cinnamon stick for garnish, and topped off with sparkling apple cider. And when asked about this cocktail, Molly Cohen said it's the season for both brown spirits and bubbly, and this cocktail has both. Sounds like a gal after my own heart. Okay. I want to just jump right into yellow chartreuse. We're trying to cover 2 weeks worth of cocktails here, so I'm trying to dig a little deeper into yellow chartreuse, some of which are sitting behind me. All right, just got to take another sniffy sniff and sippy sip of my Blanton's bourbon here. Forgive me. And we got to go through yellow chartreuse cocktails rapid fire because we're trying to cover 2 weeks worth of content here. So as I say, we did back-to-back weeks of chartreuse and tried to highlight chartreuse in the best way we can. And so we kicked off the second week with 7 yellow chartreuse cocktails, starting with the Alamaguzum, which story goes was invented by J.P. Morgan at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, which he frequented in the late 1800s. And we did all these, as always, in chronological order. And this is a clusterfuck of a cocktail if I've ever seen one, and it is way too goddamn sweet. And there's like barely any acid. There's no balance. There's Angostura bitters, which I actually added more of, and it was still too sweet. So the original recipe was like 2 dashes Angostura bitters, a quarter ounce of orange curacao. We used Pierre Ferrand, 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup, 3/4 of an ounce of yellow chartreuse, 3/4 of an ounce of Jamaican rum. Apparently, JP was James Piermont, I believe was his original name. But yeah, the banker guy. And 1 ounce of Genever and an egg white. This just was not my cup of tea in any way, shape, or form. And this is the exact recipe we got out of the Chartreuse book. So I don't know. It was just, oh man, you would need like an ounce and a half of lime juice just to balance this out, and I still don't think it would be good. But you, in essence, have like four sweeteners. You have your orange curacao, you have simple syrup, green chartreuse. I guess not four, three. But then there's the Jamaican rum, which is we used Appleton Estate, which is a sweet rum. I mean, rum obviously, is a sweeter spirit in general. So it was so sweet. And the egg white really didn't add anything to it. And if you ever had a cocktail that was too sweet with egg white, it just tastes like frothy syrup. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't, it didn't sit well with me. But it was steeped in history, the Alamogusum, J.P. Morgan. It was interesting. It's certainly people that like maybe fruitier cocktails that are sweet might like this. I mean, it was almost too sweet to be even a dessert cocktail for me. I mean, it was insanely sweet. But jumped right into Widow's Kiss, which is 1895. So this and the Alamogusum went neck and neck in terms of their when they were invented. It's just hard to say. But George Kapler published A Widow's Kiss in Modern American Drinks in 1895. There's 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. I believe I've added 1 or 2 extra dashes because this also was stirred with not any other citrus. And 3/4 of an ounce of Benedictine French herbal liqueur matched with another 3/4 of an ounce of yellow chartreuse, another French herbal liqueur, and 1.5 ounces of Calvados. In a cocktail glass with brandied cherries. I think I have that one right behind me. Yes. Whew. Spilled it trying to grab that. It's a barbarian over here. So, this is interesting. It's sweet but delicious. I mean, this is certainly, in my opinion, like what I would consider a dessert drink. I mean, obviously you have 2 sweeteners, just a little Ango, Calvados, and brandied cherry, but like it could almost be considered a winter warmer. I mean, it's delicious. It really is good. You got to sip it, and I would drink it after dinner, but it's quite good. It's quite good. And yeah, I mean, this is something, certainly not an aperitif. It's I would liken it to a digestif or an after dinner drink, but it's quite good. And I like Calvados quite a bit. And we used Dolan Calvados. Quite good. I like it. So, Ce Soir is next in the yellow chartreuse category. That was good enough to take another sip of. Ce Soir is more of a modern classic. It's funny because we skip like 100 years here. We usually go in chronological order, and usually you have like 20, 30, maybe 50-year gap, but we jump like 115 years to a Ce Soir. That's the great thing about cocktails is it can transport you back in time in a way. Ce Soir. Nicole Lebendovich Hawthorne in Boston, 2010. And this is also a stirred drink. You have 1 dash of Angostura bitters matched with 1 dash of orange bitters, 1/2 ounce of our yellow chartreuse matched with a 1/2 ounce of Chinar, which is an artichoke liqueur, and 2 full ounces of Pierre Ferrand cognac in a cocktail glass with a lemon twist. I didn't love this cocktail. And I don't know if this is a theme that I'm not, I feel bad. It always sounds like I'm shitting on people. I'm just trying to be real. I don't know what it is about yellow chartreuse that makes people, I guess because it's already sweet and there's nothing you can do about it, but like, they just double down and make a sweet cocktail. It's like all of these are after dinner type of drinks, except for the last one, which we finish off on, which we'll get to. But it's like yellow chartreuse with lemon juice is an obvious pair to me, to balance out like a nice spirit. Like, and of course, there's going to be more to it than that. But I'm just speaking generally. It seems like it always goes great in a cocktail which has a little yellow chartreuse, a fair bit of spirit, so you have a good balance. But it's like we picked out virtually, it's probably 7. One of them's an original, as I say. The last one is an original. We picked out like 6 of 10 yellow chartreuse cocktails that anybody even knows. And all of them are like way too sweet. And yellow chartreuse is already sweet, so I guess I get it. Maybe you're trying to like make after dinner drinks, but I think most average, even bartenders, couldn't tell you a yellow chartreuse cocktail. It's just, it is what it is. So I don't know. It's we'll call this the last, this week a wash. But it's like, what do you do with it? This is one of the things we were talking about earlier. Is one of my barman friends. It's like, dude, most people are just sitting on one bottle of green chartreuse that lasts a year because they put it in the last word every now and again. Even cocktail bars. Yeah. All right, I digress again. I think it's obvious to know. It's just, I don't know. The whole thing, the story and the lore, which it seems like it's not true, just grinds my gears. But I keep on rambling, so I do apologize. But next up, we have a Gypsy Woman. This was invented by Justin Noel at 1534 in New York City, below Jacquet, which is like a legendary French joint. Went there once when I was living in New York City, and that's a half ounce of our yellow chartreuse matched with a half ounce of Saint Germain. Thank God that Justin also called for 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice and then 2 ounces of green tea infused gin. Okay. Other than the cocktail, of course I'm biased, but other than the cocktail that we made, the last one, which is the original Alchemix cocktail, this was the best one on the list. I sucked it down like it was going out of style. It's the only one I really wanted to drink, frankly. Because you have the citrus, and the green tea infused gin I was very impressed with. For us, I think the recipe in the chartreuse book called for 2-hour infusion. I was tasting it as it was being infused, so I actually stopped the infusion after about an hour and a half, I think, and we used Citadelle, which I think is the only reason why this cocktail worked, is because it had the citrus and had the green tea infused gin, which is acidic already, and Citadelle is sort of like as the name would allude to, it's a citrus forward French gin. I think it worked really well. I don't think that his recipe called for a specific gin. That's the one that I chose, actually. And I think it was a good move. So you have enough acid to balance out your 2 sweeteners that you have in that cocktail, which seems to be a theme with yellow chartreuse cocktails historically, is they need to have 5 sweeteners in them. So anyway, that one was good. Lemon twist as well, so you have a little bitterness on the front palate and the nose, which helps cut that sweetness as well in a cocktail glass. It was good. Gypsy Woman, highly recommend it. Watch the video. It's a great cocktail. Shout out to Justin Noel. I went on a wild goose chase to find that Blanton's, actually. The Denver area where we're filming, I probably went to 20 different places within the 3 months we were building this bar. As I say, I built it with my hands, my bare hands. My damn bare hands. But when I finally found it, I also came across a bottle of Pappy's, which you might be able to see in the back there if you're watching on video. I've got my first bottle of Pappy's as well, so it wasn't all bad. And I digress. The 5th yellow chartreuse cocktail that we made is called an aide-memoire. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but if there's any group of people that cannot give me crap about talking weird, it's the French. That it translates to like a memory stimulant, I guess. So, I mean, I like the concept. I really do. It's like sort of course, that's the great thing about cocktails is like you can be drinking a cocktail that maybe you accidentally tried 3-4 years prior, and it like immediately stimulates your memory. It's a great name. I like it. This is from Jason Walsh. Yeah, Jason Walsh at Bier, New York City, 2015. 2 dashes orange bitters, half ounce yellow chartreuse, 1.5 ounces of Carpano Antica, sweet vermouth. It's a low ABV type of cocktail, and you stir those ingredients straight into a martini glass, topped with Prosecco. I actually like this cocktail a lot. It was interesting that he did a good job of balancing out the sweetness of both the sweet vermouth and the yellow chartreuse. You don't have too much acid. You just have the bitters. But I would recommend personally using a dry Prosecco. I have no idea what we used. It's my producer picked it up, but I know it was dry. It was very dry. It wasn't anything crazy, but it is what it is. I'm not gonna pretend like I know a lot about Prosecco, but it was a dry Prosecco. Who cares? No, I'm kidding. It was good. It was a great cocktail. Aide Memoire, low ABV. I would liken it to like a aperitif. I liked it. Oh yeah, also orange twist. So you have orange bitters, yellow chartreuse, sweet vermouth, Prosecco, orange twist. This is a very aperitif-like cocktail. I loved it, actually. This is really good. Bubbles, vermouth, it's not strong, but it's not too sweet either. It's good. It's a great cocktail. This is the one, too. If you watch the Yellow Chartreuse video on YouTube, this is the one where my producer freaked out when I popped the Prosecco. I was trying to be cool and look awesome on camera. So I popped it. I'm obviously a dumbass. Nobody actually thinks I'm cool. I just am kind of monotone and annoying. But anyway, if you were watching on video, that's one where I shit the bed and everyone freaks the fuck out, and then we start laughing, and it was funny. But I can't redo that because we only got one bottle. We only had one bottle at the time, so I do apologize for that. But great cocktail from from Jason Walsh, Aide Memoire, which, by the way, the term can be likened to like deja vu in a way. It's same kind of thing, except for it's obviously on the nose. That's one other interesting thing I just read recently. I'm sure it's bullshit, but somewhere along the lines of 4,000 different combinations of flavor profiles human beings can perceive separately on the nose. And largely the reason why this is because of evolutionary biology and evolving to be able to find food and not die. But I'm certainly no expert in that area. All right, next up, Daisy de Santiago. Man, okay. Now I feel like I'm shitting the bed. I probably shit on yellow chartreuse too much. Some of these are good. Some of these are really good. This one was really good. I actually loved this cocktail, the Daisy de Santiago. Now, the Daisy de Santiago was adapted from Jerry Thomas, but Jerry Thomas, was a man of his time. He was a genius in some ways, but he basically said that you could put whatever spirit that you want in a daisy. I believe brandy was the most popular daisy cocktail, but what happened was Martin Kate from Smuggler's Cove, which you all know, we're a big fan of the book. I've never been to the joint in San Francisco, but I'm a huge fan of Martin Kate. We did an entire episode on tiki cocktails a few weeks back. You should definitely go back and check that. Every single recipe came out of Smuggler's Cove because they are... I just drew a blank. Let's just say they're the tiki, I want to say connoisseurs, but they're really more like the tiki savants. They're the tiki gods. They're the modern tiki geniuses, Martin Kate. And think his wife's name is Rebecca. Forgive me if I fucked that up, but Smuggler's Cove, amazing book, trendsetters. So the Daisy de Santiago adapted from Smuggler's Cove, published in the book in 2016 because in essence it is a tiki cocktail, which has many definitions, but it is half ounce of Demerara sugar syrup, 1 ounce of lime juice, half ounce of the yellow chartreuse, 1 ounce of club soda that you actually just shake right in the tin. That was interesting. Luckily, if it's a smaller amount, your tin's not going to explode. And then 1.5 ounces of a lightly aged rum. We used Havana Club Anejo Blanco, which is a 12-month age statement, one of my personal favorite light rums because it's rested for 12 months. But again, I'm drinking whiskey at the moment, as I do. And so give it a shake, strain it. They call for a double rock, so we put it in a goblet glass. It was just more fun. And then fill up with crushed ice and then mint. Mint made this cocktail for me, and this is what I love about mint. You know, I'm not a mint savant or anything like that, but I do love a good mint if it's used right. In my opinion, would be most people that make a mojito for you probably use it wrong, and the reason why is because they crush it up too much, and they also use too much of it. I watched a video on YouTube with I don't remember exactly how many millions of views, where someone just shook the mint right in the tin and then dirty poured it into a glass. It almost made me flip out because it made me so angry. Have you ever seen the way that a Cuban makes a mojito? They lightly muddle it to where the mint doesn't break. Because if the mint breaks, then it's going to be bitter. You're going to get this bitter fiber sort of flavor that comes out of the mint when you essentially destroy it. So you shouldn't shake it. A real mojito is actually just stirred in the glass. And the way that the Cubans do it is they gradually add ice and gradually stir whilst stirring the mint up into the cocktail so it's evenly distributed after it's muddled in the bottom of the glass. So the point is that the biggest thing about mint, in my opinion, when it's best used when it's just got a good nose. It's just there for the nose. You just dig into the cocktail. And this one was actually crushed ice with a straw. You should go look at the pictures. It's a beautiful cocktail. Watch the video. Do the whole thing. Daisy de Santiago. It's like a tiki, crushed ice, mint on the nose, but not too much mint. It's beautiful. I love it. It's a great cocktail. So that was the last one. Now, last up of yellow chartreuse cocktails, Wild Stallions. As I say, I have this cocktail next to me right now. Similar to mint. Beautiful rosemary on the nose. Except for its ginger rosemary garnish spritzed with absinthe. So candied ginger skewered with rosemary, spritzed with absinthe, lit, put into the glass. Now, as I say, this was the first Alchemix original cocktail we've ever made. And the reason why I waited 2 years to make an Alchemix original cocktail is because I love cocktail history, and I always find that the people that are making cocktails online, I've said it a million times, don't pay the proper respect to their predecessors. So we're really trying hard to do that, which is why I preface this entire episode by saying that I shit the bed on something with the vodka cocktails, and I admit that. It was bad, and the whole thing, it was just a year of the book for the Vesper. But the Vesper is deeply historically rich cocktail, so I felt horrible about it. But I did feel that it was time to finally release an Alchemix original cocktail. It's called Wild Stallions. I didn't personally invent it. One of my best friends, John Philby, cocktail consultant, been in the game for probably 3 decades or so, invented this cocktail for a client in 2019. Here's the way it goes. So you take a sprig of rosemary, strip the leaves, throw it right into your shaker, and add a half ounce of honey ginger syrup. We covered how to make the honey ginger syrup right here at the bar in the video. So definitely watch that. In essence, it was about 25 grams of ginger, peeled, chopped, simmered with 3 parts honey to 1 part water in a pan on the lowest heat possible for about an hour, and it's amazing. It's amazing syrup. 3/4 ounce of lemon juice and 2 ounces of Blanton's bourbon. It's an obvious twist on the sour. Give it a shake, strain it into your rocks glass. We double strained it into a chilled, etched rocks glass. Feels good in the hand. And we took our candied ginger that is skewered with fresh rosemary, spritzed it with absinthe, lit it, and set it down on top of the cocktail with fresh ice cubes, which gave it a beautiful nose. And named this cocktail after the obvious symbolism when it comes to Blanton's, which is one of my personal favorite bourbons. And it's very good. It's very good. I think I can honestly say, not being biased, this is probably the best yellow chartreuse cocktail I've ever had. And as I said, we tried to highlight chartreuse in a positive light. And I think we did them a favor by inventing this recipe. And it's very good. It's really good. It's not even that complicated. So I do appreciate everybody for watching this episode. And if you haven't seen the videos, go back to the YouTube channel, watch the videos. The recipes and the instructional videos are getting better. I don't think there's anybody out there doing it like we're doing it. We put a lot of time and effort into highlighting cocktails in a unique and interesting way. More importantly, doing very, very deep historical dives and putting now, as you know, putting a lot of effort into our own cocktails. So thanks for tuning in to the second episode of the Alchemix podcast, the Chartreuse Showdown. And as always, I'm Tommy Paul. Cheers.